What's up, everybody? We wanted to take a quick moment to remind each of you to please like, share, comment, subscribe to the podcast. Tommy,
Ring that bell.
ring the bell. It goes a long way to support the podcast. Besides that, Tommy and I offer online coaching. The links for that will be below. The link for my merch store will be below as well. And without further ado, we bring to you a Thinking Man's podcast. A Thinking Man's podcast. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of A Thinking Man's podcast. This is episode 19. I'm here with my good friend, Tommy Stiles. What's up, buddy?
How we doing?
Doing all right, man. So we are going to be, based on the response, and like we've kind of started to schedule out kind of the same pattern in how we're going to structure our episodes. And we got a good response to the growth hormone episode. So as our next episode in the PED kind of segment or schedule, Tommy and I are going to touch on insulin. And with that, the floor is yours, my friend. Let's run with it however you want.
Insulin, the second game changer.
The magical, yeah.
I did think insulin was going to be way more effective on my bodybuilding journey than it actually is. Like we talked about with the growth hormone episode, anabolic steroids, growth hormone, and insulin have a nice synergistic trifecta. So I think now the main, obviously insulin is a diabetic drug. Your body produces insulin. If you are a type 1 diabetic, that means your pancreas doesn't produce insulin and you need to take exogenous insulin to combat that. So why do bodybuilders use it? I would say the main reason is if you're taking growth hormone, it's a way to manage your blood glucose. So obviously, as we touched on in that episode, growth hormone causes insulin resistance. You can start to see those fasted blood glucose readings in your A1C go up, which is what you don't want. So a way to manage that would be with insulin use. So there's a couple different insulins we'll touch on, maybe three. You got your fast-acting insulin, which the trade name is Humalog. Your slow-acting basal insulin, which would be Lantus, is the most common one that you're going to hear about in the bodybuilding industry. There's a couple other ones that are off-brand, and I've actually used a couple off-brand ones. For the most part, they all work the same. It's just pharmaceutical bullshit on what's sold and what's not. And then one that you can actually get without a prescription from like a Walmart or a CVS, which is the one I started on, is Novolin. So with Lantus and Humalog, it's actually a prescription medication. So you're not going to be able to just acquire that over the counter. But if all you had access to was over the counter insulin from Walmart, you can get Novolin. So rather than make this a scientific, you can Google all the stuff we would tell you. So I'll just speak on what I do and what I've done. What I currently do, all I use is 10 IUs of Lantus in the morning fasted on my training days. I don't use it on my non-training days. For me, that's keeping my blood glucose on the amount of growth hormone that I'm on in an acceptable range. My A1C is always great. I never have seen that above 5.3, I don't think. So for me, that's all I need. If I needed more, I've done as much as 20 every day a few years ago, and I didn't notice any differences. Lantus isn't something you're going to really notice. You're going to feel. You're literally taking it to control your blood glucose. I don't even think I would use it unless I was on growth hormone, unless I was someone who had insulin sensitivity issues. But I feel like that's something that could be addressed with your diet, your other factors of the plan. So I have done Humalog a lot in my life. The staple
sounds like you're in AA.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Tommy, and I used a lot of Humalog. Hi, Tommy.
Yeah, this is confession. The staple dose for a long time from like 2018 to 2020 was 12 IU's pre-workout, which is, I would consider that moderate to high for a single serving.
It's handsome. It's a handsome dose.
And that was with about 400 grams of carbs in the meal that I was having, 300 to 400. So it was well backed up. And then I had intra workout carbs. That para workout window was really loaded for me. So after 2021, I kind of got into like 6 IU's pre-workout. Felt good there. The pumps on insulin are great. You'll get you're literally, the reason people, I think insulin hit the bodybuilding world is because you're literally taking carbs and forcing them in. Like, you are forcing nutrients into the muscle. It's a transport agent. So is it considered anabolic or anti-catabolic? It's one of those things. It's like chicken or the egg, right? So for me, it was great for pumps. I haven't been doing Humalog at all the last 5 or 6 months. Just the 10 IU's Atlantis is how I start my day on training days. And I know guys that have taken Lantus all the way up to 50, 60 IU's a day. No judgment. I would have to assume they're using a shit ton of growth hormone if they need to be up that high.
Yeah.
And then you're the cost of that, that's like a pen a week or less. You're looking at a few hundred a month.
And that's somebody that's got to be eating a ton of food too.
Yeah. You're an advanced level guy or a pro if you're doing that.
Yeah.
Like I said, and I've tested it, because Lantus takes about 1 to 2 hours to kick in. I just out of curiosity, I saw what my fasted blood glucose reading was, waited an hour to eat, and there was, a 12 to 14 point drop just in that hour from using Lantus. So you can test it. And the thing about Lantus, with Humalog, you need to eat. And the way I would go about it, the way I've always done it, is have the meal before the insulin. That way, in case anything goes wrong, you drop your food, whatever, something distracts you from getting your meal in, you don't have insulin in your system and no food. Because when you put Humalog, a fast-acting insulin, in your body, it will tank your blood glucose if you have not eaten, or you're not eating, or you're not about to take a bite of food. So I think to avoid that, eat the meal, pin the insulin right after, and it works. The onset time's got to be 10, 15 minutes tops.
15 minutes. Yeah.
So it's going to start transporting those nutrients right like that. So, always keep something on hand. If you start to feel yourself go low, some liquid carbs, Gatorade, you can buy glucose tabs in the pharmacy, whatever. Insulin's definitely not something to take lightly, because I used to be a paramedic. I ran on numerous fucking diabetic calls where somebody fucked up their dose or whatever. They didn't eat when they took their insulin and they were in a diabetic coma. So it's definitely not to be taken lightly, but I do feel it's pretty hard to fuck up if you eat your meal, then pin it. And a huge issue is to make sure you're drawing up the dose you want to be doing. I know people who have just colossally messed that up, and I'm like, how did you do that? But with Lantus, you're not gonna, I think there's studies of people have tried to kill themselves with Lantus, and it doesn't work. It's such
multiple
slow
pens.
acting. Yeah. It's a slow acting drip that it's not gonna, it's not gonna tank you like a Humalog or a Novolin would. So there's really relatively no risk to it.
What was your experience like with Novolin? Because that isn't something that I've ever used. I've just used kind of the two ends of the spectrum.
So Novolin has, a 6 to 8 hour window, I believe. And what that means is, with Humalog, you're going to get that peak and then you'll stabilize. Novolin has multiple peaks across that window. So even though you have your pre-work, say you have, I was taking it pre-workout and I had a meal, I'd feel great, great, great. And then if I wasn't on top of my meal timing, say I like slipped and I was 4 hours later, I would start to feel that low kicking in. So I would say it's more risky because if something out of your control happens and you're like, oh shit, I haven't ate, and you're like starting to fall asleep behind the wheel or whatever, you know what I mean? So at the same time, part of me wants to say it's having those multiple peaks almost makes it really effective, but it's just like you got to be somebody who knows that your day is like I would have to say you have to be someone like us who works from home. Like I don't really miss meal timing. You know what I mean? So I don't tell people to take Novolin. I only did it because I had no access to anything else. That was 2016. I didn't.
And it's cheap. It's cheap and available.
I mean, yeah, I want to say I don't remember cost.
Like $20 a bottle or something.
Yeah. And they don't ID you. There's no, like, you walk up and say, I had like a bottle of Novolin. Like, there's no, are you diabetic? Like, there's no.
Did it feel weird the first time you did it? I would have felt like I was doing something wrong.
Yeah, it was like, I feel like I just went up to the counter. I was like, one bottle of Novolin, please. But yeah, that, and then you buy your syringe. You can get everything you need right there at the local Walmart. So
yeah, it's like you're a little muscular to be diabetic.
Yeah, I feel like a couple times I got some weird, like, sure, we'll get you your Novolin. But that's not one I tell, unless, like, I think I would just avoid insulin if I had to tell someone to use that, just because, like, I don't, and just because of my experience with it, like, I did have a couple times where I was getting low. I think one thing that I'm really, like, I learned about insulin medically. Like, I didn't learn about it as a bodybuilder. I learned about it in paramedic school. So I kind of have like a cheat sheet on insulin and blood sugar and like that stuff in general. So that's always been beneficial to me. And then I try to relay that stuff to clients. But the biggest thing I could say about it is insulin that I've learned is like a little bit goes a long way. I thought it was going to be something that like multiple pins a day, and like there is guys that do that, but like it's just not something I need or most people probably need. So that's my opening rant on insulin.
Yeah. I think maybe the best takeaway out of everything you said, just from like a safety standpoint, is the procedure of eating first and then doing your insulin. If we're talking about Humalog, which is a rapid acting insulin, like Tommy said, it will bury your blood sugar and then that leads to bad things. So you need, when using a rapid insulin like Humalog, you need to be prepared. Things need to be ready ahead of time. You don't want to be racing the clock and getting dizzy and hungry as your blood sugar starts to drop. So I think that's a great, just general rule of thumb, to eat your meal and then pin your rapid insulin if you're going to use it. And then also, like you said, the Lantus, you're right. I think upwards of over 300 units. Somebody attempted to kill himself with over 300 units of Lantus and like was totally fine. So the acute risk is pretty minimal, if non-existent. So I think just in general, I would agree that looking at the use of insulin in bodybuilding, I think its biggest benefit to us is just glucose management, especially when there's anabolics in play, there's growth hormone in play. We see that growth hormone pushes up insulin resistance, And then so insulin is a way of kind of mitigating that. But then also the big one is that you're basically giving your pancreas a help throughout the day. So I've talked about it. My most recent protocol, when my food was at the highest, I was using 10 units of Lantus in the morning, and that's just all day coverage. And then my first meal also was my pre-workout meal, probably my biggest meal of the day. And so I used 5 units of rapid acting Humalog as well. So, you know, I've heard protocols, I've done protocols where I've done, 10, 15, 20 units of Humalog pre-workout. And then, you have to smash tons of carbs. You're matching the carb amount then to that predetermined insulin total, and you get fat. That's what my experience was. I think it should be that when it's time to implement an insulin as like a preventative measure to maintaining pancreas function, it makes sense to, like, your diet is already set, and then you're just bringing in an effective amount of insulin. It's not to match the carbs or vice versa. So, yeah.
I think that's a good point. Is sorry to cut you off, but when a lot of people make the mistake of thinking taking insulin means you can eat more, and that's where people get fat, because we haven't talked about it yet. But insulin can absolutely build body fat up too. It doesn't just it doesn't just mean like, I can have high carbs because I'm on insulin. Don't worry. Like, it doesn't work like that. If it's like a small shuttle. It's not like this blanket everyday coverage that is just you won't get fat and you won't run into issues. You know what I mean? So that's a good point to touch on, is the amount of food you're on, titrate your insulin dose to that amount. Don't think, I'm on insulin, carbs go up 200 more grams.
Let me jack this up. Yeah.
Huge.
Insulin is a storage hormone, simply put. So we're going to store carbs and we're going to store fat with insulin. And so absolutely it's anabolic, meaning that it's going to grow adipose tissue as well. Like, I've gotten super fat on insulin. And then it's also, anecdotally, I almost feel like that was more, I accrued visceral fat at a faster rate as well, because those were the preps that were most difficult to get the last bit off. So, like those prior off seasons that I got insulin fat, those ensuing preps were my hardest. So, and I don't think a lot of times I even reached what my best conditioning can be. So, all things to consider. I do think, as far as, like, we talked about it, I think we both had this like view where we put growth hormone and insulin on a pedestal, where there's like this mystique that it's these game changing hormones. And I don't think that's the case, but I also think, like, I think I mentioned this about growth hormone. I think if I could do it all over again for myself, I would have introduced insulin sooner, like introduced growth hormone and insulin sooner, for that synergy that we get with anabolics, because it would have just allowed me to use less anabolics. And I think our greatest risk, the greatest risk we expose ourselves to as bodybuilders, is through steroids, more than some of these other ancillary hormones like growth hormone or insulin. So if I could limit that and then still get as good or better results by introducing these things sooner at a lower dose, I think that would make sense. And then we're also just talking about providing assistance to your pancreas earlier in your process. You're not 4 or 5 years deep of blasting huge amounts of carbohydrate totals, and then now all of a sudden you're going to bring insulin in and give your pancreas some relief. So I think insulin, just as a blanket statement, I think insulin is a good preventative. John uses the term prophylactic. preventative strategy to preserve pancreas function in the long term. So yeah, that's kind of been my experience. I think on the other end of it, of prior experiences I've talked about, I've done protocols where I did, 20 units of Humalog pre-workout with, fucking 200 grams of carbs or whatever, or 150 grams of carbs intra following that, and then another 20 post, and some big huge, cereal meal or something. And it's I know that there's people that have kind of almost made a name off of some of these like insulin protocols. Milos is somebody that comes to mind. And no knock on him. Obviously, he works with some of the best athletes in the world. The proof is in the pudding. But I'm not sure how much application protocols like that have for people that are not the genetic elite. I don't know how much, like, we know for sure that exogenous insulin, when compared to your own production, provides no greater stimulus on protein synthesis. Like, there's nothing magical about exogenous insulin where we're shooting it and now all of a sudden it's 10 times more anabolic than the insulin that our body produces itself. That's not the case. There's no anabolic benefit to one over the other. It's just a big picture preventative strategy to keep you healthy. We talk about it all the time. To be a good bodybuilder, you want to set aside 10 years. So I need that pancreas working at a high function for as long as I can get it. So yeah, those are some of my general thoughts about things. If you want to talk about different protocol, like what's been the protocol for you that you feel has yielded the greatest benefit? Like some of those bigger insulin protocols, did you get, did you feel like you had lasting gains and those off seasons led to successful preps, or what was your experience with that? I mean, you stay pretty lean, so I'm not sure that we're gonna see the same challenges from it.
Yeah, I think it was just, a means to drive more carbs into the muscle for me. And that's,
you have to eat a ton of food as well, so it makes sense. You said you've been on you started like 2016, you said, right? So you were somebody that brought it in pretty early on.
Yeah, with the
Smart.
Novolin, and that was, so this is another. I started insulin without growth hormone. I had never done growth hormone when I got into insulin.
Oh, this will be a good topic because this is, I feel like, sorry to cut you off, but I feel like this is a big, kind of polarizing debate within bodybuilding. Like, there are people that black and white say you should not be using insulin if you're not on growth hormone. There's no benefit to it. And then, there's people that would say the opposite, that they're two different drugs and they each can provide their own benefit separately. Where do you stand on that? Are you, suggesting to your clients that they use one without the other, or how do you typically do things?
I don't like to. So the black and white crowd, I just don't want to ever say an absolute. It wasn't the end of the world for me running insulin without growth hormone. I didn't get to the point of body fat being, a problem. I was still able to do a 20-week prep and get pretty fucking sliced. So I think
Sliced.
Context is king. So a little bit goes a long way. I said I've done as low as 6. You said 5. Like, who's to say someone can do 2 or 3?
No, I've done as low as 3 actually. It's just that my most recent food total landed me at 5.
Right. So you're gonna titrate the dose to what the amount of food is that you're taking.
Yeah.
So to say that there can't be any benefit to that without growth hormone in play, like, maybe I just want to prevent a huge spike in blood sugar for that meal. So I use 2 IUs of Humalog with the meal. Is that not the same thing as like using glucose disposal agents? You know what I mean? So,
but they actually work though. the insulin actually works.
I believe I could find application if when I'm looking at all parts of like working with a client, like maybe they can afford insulin, but they can't afford growth hormone. If it's an option, if it's a tool in the toolbox and I feel it can be beneficial, I'll use it. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee as much as it would be if they're using growth hormone, but maybe it's someone with a sluggish metabolism who, in order to put on size, food does have to go up. And if I want to manage blood glucose, like, what are you going to do? You're going to not push food and never grow because you're worried about running into blood glucose issues? Or are you going to manage the blood glucose just like you would on growth hormone in order to get the food higher to put on more muscle, in hopes that you create a higher caloric demand for that individual over time by putting more tissue on their frame, and maybe you can correct the issue in a way. I'm just thinking out loud, but I don't think it's black and white that, if you don't use growth hormone, you can't use insulin. Like, I'm sure I could find, there's at least one application to it.
Yeah.
So, and myself doing it, like, and I even did it with Novolin, which is probably the most riskiest one to do as far as putting on body fat, because you're getting multiple peak times across that duration where it might not be beneficial to have that peak. But if I had something more stable that I was controlling, like a 15-minute onset from a hemolog, I think I could work with it. It just depends on the body type. I mean, when you're looking at like a true ectomorph like me, I think the risk of getting fat off insulin is really hard. Whereas, like, I know Dusty's talked about his experience with insulin. Like, it just, the pumps are dope, but he was just getting fat. So
same. The pumps are sweet for like 2 weeks.
I think you just got to know your body type.
Yeah, for me, I feel like I would agree, and I think both drugs have their own place. I don't think, there's a lot of synergy, and I think it's not uncommon to see advanced protocols that have both in play. But I have used each individually with certain people, depending on the context. Sometimes it just comes down to like affordability or availability. Like, I can't even get my hands on this. So I have situations where I have a guy that I help, and he was eating like, fuck, man, I think like upwards of like 800 grams of carbs on training days, where we're just trying to figure out ways to just shove more food. Growth hormone wasn't in the budget or in the picture for him, or for whatever reason. So no growth hormone, but you're eating tons of food. It makes sense to help your pancreas. So I had him on Lantus. And then conversely, I have some guys maybe that can get their hands on growth hormone, and they just can't get their hands on insulin. Or they're just they're earlier on in their process, and I have them on growth hormone, but blood glucose hasn't gotten out of control yet because they're still early in the game. They don't need to be on 6 units of growth hormone, so it's not going to skew the blood sugar quite as much.
Right.
So I think both serve their own purpose, and then it just happens to be that when they come together, there's a nice synergy between the two. So
here's an interesting point. I guarantee any diabetic prescribed Lantus isn't on growth hormone. So
I would be willing to bet that most of them are. Yeah,
there is some applicable. Clearly, there's use.
Excellent point too, to the point that I made earlier about exogenous insulin not providing any type of additional benefit to protein synthesis. If that was the case, if there was something magic or something additional from shooting your insulin as opposed to it being made in your own body, every diabetic would be fucking jacked. All of them would be huge. I've seen guys that are diabetic that eat, a regular, like, average civilian diet, and they have to put in 30 units of Humalog with a meal. And it's like, I'm looking at that like with moon eyes, because I'm like, Jesus Christ, dude, what are you doing? And he's like, what do you mean? This is what I do for lunch. Like, so yeah, all those people would be huge at this point. So there's really nothing magic to it. I think the big play is just a preventative one.
Yeah. Where are you at with not because like coming up, I'm sure you and I heard the same rumor mill, like you can't have fats when you take insulin or you'll get fat.
Sure. Yeah.
Every single meal I've ever had with insulin, I'm pretty sure there's been some sort of fat in it, a little bit anyway.
Yeah.
So,
No, I had a coach that hammered, the first coach that really exposed me to kind of like exotic insulin protocol. That was their, it was like, I'm shoving insulin with fucking, you know, zero fat per serving sugary cereal. Like it was just like, he was like, do not have any fats and we're just going to pound sugary carbs. And then I just ended up fat. So yeah, same thinking. Like if that was the case, where you couldn't eat fats around the use of insulin, diabetics would be fucking super fat. Each one of them would be super duper fat. So I think that same deal, that just comes down to energy expenditure. Like, are you in a calorie surplus or a deficit for the day? If so, if you're in a surplus, you're going to store more. Insulin is a storage hormone. So if you fucking way overshoot your surplus because you put insulin in and now you want to add 50 grams of carbs to your pre, intra, and post, yeah, you overshoot your surplus and you get fat. That's what happens. But yeah, as far as like it being some like magic thing where it's like, oh, I'm exclusively storing fat now alongside this insulin, I think that thought is misguided.
yeah, because I just remember hearing like everything I read or heard was all about like, and then you start to see top gurus and the meals that have insulin with them and they're pros, and it's like every single muffin I have ever seen on the
Yeah,
has some amount of fat. Even the low fat one at Dunkin' Donuts has 6 grams of
still
fat.
like 6 grams or 7 grams of fat.
I'm not saying to have it with like steak or salmon, but
right.
I don't think, because my big thing, like Dusty used Pop-Tarts. I had Pop-Tarts every pre-workout meal for probably 3 years.
Really? Did you get sick of them?
Yeah, there's 10 grams of fat in Pop-Tarts. And
what flavors would you go with? I'm just derailing this podcast to talk about food.
This is big. So anyone listening at this point, I need you to put your favorite Pop-Tart in the comments below. And I hope we get some heated debates here. So my top
what
3.
do you have? All right, top 3, go.
Top 3, because I've consumed a lot more than most people, especially at my age.
I'm sure.
Top 1 has to be the OG strawberry, the frosted strawberry.
All right.
At close 2, and this is before Kellogg started getting skimpy with the amount of frosting they were putting on, because it started to become a wafer instead of an actual Pop-Tart. S'mores. And then the third is chocolate fudge.
Okay, I'm not a chocolate guy, so I'm eliminating the last 2 that you just gave. I gotta go as my number 1. Might need to pull up a Google search on this so that you understand what I'm talking about. But the wild berry Pop-Tart is the GOAT.
That takes me back. I remember that one. So that's good.
That's my number 1. I would say I would probably put like brown sugar and strawberry as my other 2 staple. Blueberry is good. I mean, they're all good. I love Pop-Tarts. And as you can tell, I'm at the end of a mini cut. So I'm just derailing this podcast to talk about food.
Focus. Brown sugar is good too. That's hard not to put in my top 3. Now, I'm
a super basic bitch as well. And living in New Jersey, you go through like a beautiful change of season. So fall was always my thing. I will smash some fucking pumpkin spice Pop-Tarts. They are phenomenal, hands down. They would have to be in my top 3 as well, actually. So something's got to come out. But
I'm not a pumpkin guy at all.
You have a neck tattoo. I didn't take you for somebody that was going to be into pumpkin.
Everything about the fall and the pumpkin obsession is like, what is wrong?
I love it.
Now, do you eat them out of the package, or do you actually toast them?
No, I'm usually just eating them raw. A couple of it depends. Like I don't even remember the last time I had Pop Tarts, but I
I don't like
guess
them
if
toasted, honestly.
it depends on which ones. The brown sugar ones are excellent toasted.
Okay.
But like any of the basic like fruit flavors, so like strawberry or blueberry or even the wild berry one, I'm probably just eating them raw straight out of the package. Um, and then so another food thing. So you did Pop Tarts as like your go-to pre-workout thing, I'm assuming alongside some insulin. When I had that kind of crazy insulin protocol, I was doing not only was I doing a fucking mixing bowl of cereal post, but I was doing Rice Krispies pre, and that was awesome for like 3 months.
I was gonna say it has a
Every
shelf.
day I was like, this is fucking killer. I would just stuff my face with them in the parking lot, shoot the insulin, go in and train and get crazy wild pumps. And then eventually I got to a point where I was so disgusted by them, I almost get like a vomit reflex when
Yeah.
I see them at this point, because they're just they ruined it for me. And there's not as much like there's not as much variety in different like flavors that they offer, you know what I mean? I've tried a couple, but none of them are all that great. Um, but that's funny about the Pop Tarts. So that was your go-to thing that you got from Dusty, and he does this as well.
I think he had, or it was just something he
There he
developed.
was.
Like
Yeah.
everybody's got, Chris Aceto's got the muffins.
Got the muffins. Yeah.
Maybe Chris had him on Pop Tarts and that's where he got it. I don't know, but everybody's got. At the end of the day, it's carbs, right?
It's calorie surplus or deficit.
I can
at
tell
the
you, I
end of the
wouldn't
day.
eat Pop Tarts without insulin.
Really?
Probably not. I don't.
Okay.
I just think because it was chicken, rice, and Pop Tarts.
Chicken, rice, and Pop
Like I
Tarts.
said, it was
okay. That's bodybuilding.
It was a big amount of carbohydrates with 12 IUs of insulin, or 6 depending on the year. So
let's talk timing actually. So you in that scenario, you're having the meal, and then you mentioned that you would pin the insulin, and then how long until you go train? An hour?
yeah, so I would I know I've heard guys talk about pinning their Humalog in the parking lot and shit, and I'm like, I've
done that.
waited like an hour. Like, I want that pre-workout meal to be settled, and then I'll go in. I still get great pumps. It's not like the insulin pumps me up as soon as I take it.
Right.
So, because even though the onset time's quick, isn't the duration's what, 3-4 hours?
Yes. I think onset is 15, peak I think is about an hour, and then half-life is like 2 hours or 3 hours, something along those lines.
Yeah. So I think you're still getting the benefits of it.
Yeah.
Maybe there's guys who want to time out that peak to administering your insulin around to where you're like, I don't know, mid workout when that peak hits, or like, I don't know how that would work, but
that was the thinking. If I could rationalize what I was doing back then, it was like
yeah,
that, and
makes
I also
sense.
would go through a pretty extensive, like, pre-training mobility stability routine.
Yeah.
Which that could take me anywhere from like 10 to 20 minutes.
You
And then at that,
intra during that.
yeah, I'm basically I have it chugged down basically by the first exercise. And then I was
did it too. It was like,
yeah,
by the second, you should be done by the second exercise, is what
yeah,
Dante had told me. Like,
yeah. And so part of that too, then, like, I hear you like smashing all this in. Part of that whole recipe was that you were to have like your actual pre-workout meal like 2.5 or 3 hours before you were going to go train. So you have that actual meal well ahead. But then, you're having fucking crispy treats and insulin in the parking lot. And that's kind of that. And then that big intra that you're chugging down is kind of fueling the training. And then I would go out to the car, and would not recommend this, but I would just get in the car to leave, pin the insulin, drive home, and eat the cereal. I would definitely recommend Tommy's protocol, where just get home, eat the cereal or whatever the meal is, and then pin the insulin. Because there's been a couple times I've been in the car like, this is getting a little sketchy. I feel like I could die on Route 9 here. So
Hey,
Um,
I had and nobody told me to do this, so I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, where I was curious about insulin and what I could do. So I was
Ooh,
doing
this is another rendition of Tommy's Spicy Secrets. Cue in this graphic.
something I wouldn't do again just because I don't think it worked. I think it was just dumb. But I was doing like 20 IUs of insulin or 20 to 30 IUs of insulin of Humalog, but I was breaking it down into pre, intra, and post insulin use. I think I had come across some information about like
Wait, hold on. Go back and say this again. 20 total units that was broken down into pre, intra, and post. You were going into the bathroom and pinning.
Yeah. I
Okay.
did this for a short period. This was like 3 weeks.
Okay.
At this point, I was convinced that like I had the body type and I could eat the amount of food that would make me like an insulin responsive guy. So I was like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna jack this up. So the highest I ever did was 10 pre, 10 intra, and 10 post. And I mean, I had at least 600 grams of carbs in that para workout window.
Were you fat?
Looking back at pics, I was probably softer than I needed to be, but I
Okay.
wasn't like,
Did you feel insane in the gym, like pump wise?
yeah, they were just bursting through.
Is that the craziest that you remember feeling in the gym? Like that's a pretty substantial protocol.
Yeah, I think it, but that's also the time there was a couple times where like I had a couple lows come in, like or I just couldn't keep up with the carbs to stay on it. Because you know you're training and you're trying to drink your intra and then you're trying to train, and it's like I just felt like I was fucking it was intense a couple times. So there was
Yeah.
one instance where I literally ate 4 bagels in 10 minutes and I mowed through them and I felt my blood sugar come up as I did it.
Oh, because it had gotten low and then you're just ravenous.
Yeah. So I was in the gym training,
yeah.
And I don't know if it happened to be that intra workout dose was too much. And I finished the set and I was just like, whoa. And I walked to the front. This was when I was living in the gym. So I was kind of doing a bunch of crazy shit at the time anyway. And I just had a sleeve of bagels and I put down 4 in a matter of not even 5 minutes.
See, when you first explained that story, I was like, what? That's a ridiculous, not only amount, but just the texture of that to get down that quick. But then now hearing it was like, as you were going hypo, people that haven't had this experience that listen to this are not going to understand the level of hunger that you get to when your blood sugar is rocketing down, dude. I remember literally eating an entire mixing bowl of cereal, like without breathing, like without coming up for air, like and then sitting back after and like my blood sugar had stabilized and being like, I just ate an entire box of cereal, like, and that was what I was supposed to do, but you put it down. Yeah. It's I almost feel like some of these guys that do like eating challenges and shit, I almost wonder if some of them are like just hitting some Humalog real quick and then letting it settle before they begin, or like any of these like eating challenges I've seen on YouTube. Because that'll do it, man. That will make you hungry, like beyond recognition. Like you could be eating with someone that's part of your family or your significant other, and then they'd see you eat like this and they would be like, what the fuck was that? Like you were like a different person. So it's
survival. I mean, you're fucking you're like sweat. I'm dripping sweat down my body. I'm like woozy, cognitive functions impaired. So it's definitely not, a joke at that point. So
this is a good time. This is a good time to remind everybody, 1, don't do that. But 2, insulin, if you're using it correctly, you should never feel it the way that Tommy and I are describing it. You should never feel dizzy or just crazy, like ravenously hungry. One of the pieces of that protocol that I was doing, I would actually wait. So I would pin that post Humalog, And not only would I drive home, but I would get home and check my blood sugar. And if it wasn't below 80, I wouldn't eat. I would wait until my blood sugar was below 80. Which trying something like that, you're gonna swing and miss sometimes. There's times where it was like I could feel it as I was testing it, it was low, and then it reads that it's 54, and I need to get this food down in 2 minutes. But I think generally for people listening to this and people that are listening to this that help others, as a general rule, you should never feel the insulin that you have in your protocol. It should never feel like you're going hypo.
Yeah, no, that was just me being dumb and
I've been there.
I wanted to experiment. So I could tell people, and I would never tell a client to do any of that shit. And just the idea of like, man, I gotta go pin in the bathroom while I'm training, and then you're pinning before
it's a lot. You're all sweaty and shit.
Whole fucking thing. So here's another interesting thing that I know you heard, because I heard it too, coming up, is with insulin, 10 grams of carbs for every IU. Like it was just some fucking black and white.
This is where people get fucked up and get fat. This is what I was talking about earlier. This is the genesis of my thought from earlier in the podcast, where I was saying your diet should already be set, and then you're just choosing an appropriate amount of insulin for that. Yep. Not, hey, I'm gonna do fucking 20 units of Humalog, and because of that I need to do 200 grams of carbs with this one meal. That's how you're gonna get fat. I think as a general rule, yes, it should be that you have like 10 grams of carbs per unit, but that should then just speak to how little that you actually need. Like I was telling you earlier, I was using 5 grams of Humalog, or 5 units of Humalog in my pre-workout meal. This is a meal with probably 150 grams of carbs, and I'm using 5 units. So it's like, that's how it should be. But yeah, I've always heard that the 10 grams per unit.
I just think 10 is one. You should never like set up a meal, like you said. Don't set up a meal plan where it's like, all right, insulin, know what you're already having, and you have a response to it prior. Like you should have been checking your blood glucose to know the insulin's even warranted in some capacity. So, but I think the whole 10 per IU black and white is a little low, because I think about that. If I stuck to that, like 60 grams of carbs for 6 IUs, I'd be hypo in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I'd mow through 60 grams of carbs. Right.
Yeah.
So I just think there's no way to like tell that to everyone. So I would probably go, if I'm giving someone insulin, they're going to have a little bit more carbohydrates. And maybe that's where the fats come in, is they slow down the absorption of those carbs. So a lot of ways to look at it. I just thought that was definitely that. And then if you have fats, like those were the 2 things I heard coming up about insulin. So
another point on the fats too, when you think about it, it's like, we've just described what low blood sugar feels like, especially for you, like while you're in the gym. So we want the opposite of that. We want our blood sugar elevated and stable while we're training. So, if you are someone that's using a pre-workout insulin, even if you're not, I could make an argument. Most of my clients have, and most of the diets that I do have pre-workout meals that have a considerable amount of fat in it, intentionally alongside a good chunk of carbs, because it's like, I want to elevate your blood sugar going into training, and then I want it to hold there. I want it to stabilize there. So
it slowly decline right into that
and then until you get, and then it kind of slowly sets you up to be able to take down another big meal post. But you don't want to be, man, like I've been on diets, and I've seen some diets where somebody has like 100+ grams of carbs in a meal and little to no fat. And then, the client comes back and they're like, man, like three exercises in, I'm fucking hypo and chilly and sweaty. It's like, okay, like, yeah, your blood sugar is crashing. It's not stable. You need fats to stabilize it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's just a game of understanding what's in front of you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, insulin, to kind of summarize, it's like it's a tool. It's never going to do anything remarkable by itself, so to speak, but when added in with, you know, your cycle, your growth hormone potentially, and then adding that, it's just a trifecta to build this perfect window that sets you up for progression.
Yeah. That's said beautifully, pal. I couldn't wrap it up better myself. I think that's everything. I think there's a lot of takeaways that we delivered to the people. So yeah, anything else?
No, I'm serious about the Pop-Tart flavors though. Put them in the comments. YouTube. Like I need to know where people are at.
Yeah, I'm gonna go comment as well once it's up. So all right, everybody. Thanks for joining us again for another episode. For Tommy Stiles, I'm Joseph PIRCHER. This was a Thinking Man's podcast, and we are out.